and oh, beautiful. And we've got a terrific presenter today. I would like to introduce Prue Oswin, my beautiful colleague here. I like Prue for many, many reasons, but let's go through a number of formality before I share you a little bit more details about Prue. And Prue, please feel free to bring up your slide that gives like some of your formality information. So Prue is a registered professional engineer specializing in active transport. She has worked for local government, state government, and she's produced several projects and programs and plans and guidelines to help active travel and active transport to find route in Australia and New Zealand. She's also really, conversant with the safe system principles and ensuring that safety and sustainability are really going hand in hand with active travel. For me, Prue sort of signifies a person who is really in tune with what the community wants. So she's worked with the schools, with like community, and like whenever I talk to Prue, I really get to know more about the community and how we can talk to our community, bring them along the journey and do a better job for active travel. Prue, of course, is a parent. She's used to be a trial athlete, an Iron Woman, and she used that experience to understand active travel and advocate for it. She's worn a couple of Doc Marten boots, like walking around, pushing prams. So she's actually practicing what she preaches. It gives me absolute delight to bring you Prue Oswin. And Prue, floor is yours.
Thank you, Hafez. That's a lovely introduction. I couldn't ask for more. So anyway, I'm just going to get straight into it. We've had the introductions now. So today is all about where do we need raised priority crossings. So it's about drilling down a little bit more deeply into the detail from where we were yesterday. Yesterday we were looking at why we needed them, and now we're going into where we can actually put them. Because all good where problems will have a map. So we're going to start with a bit of a map of where we're going to be going today. So we're going to start with a little bit of a reflection and some activities on what they are and why we use them, just to make sure that we've got that confirmed. We're going to look at where we are now, and that's when we're going to have a look at some of our homework, and hopefully you got a chance to do that. It's not going to be a problem if you didn't, because you'll get to see the results from other people, and you can go into that later. After that, we're going to have a look at where we could install raised crossings, and we're going to look at that first in the context of greenfield sites, drawing on risk and connection as key principles there, and then we're going to look at some methodologies for brownfield sites, which have got some added complexities there. We'll go into the rules about where to think about feasibility, and then we'll have a look at our Swan Hill case study and some of the results from our survey there, and hopefully we'll bring it all together. Just before I get started, I think we've got the link to the Miro board, if we got that in the chat, but we'll get that in the chat. So some of the things I'm talking about will be on the Miro board. You can jump in there and have a look. We'll have one activity on the Miro board today, and also some of the results from the survey I've put in there as well. So you can look in there, have a little bit of a look around. Also, we've got a summary sheet that will hopefully bring it together because we've got quite a lot of content to get through. Okay, so to start with a bit of a reflection on what is a raised crossing. So we really think about three different criteria to define, or three key attributes that define a raised crossing. So it's a crossing for path users, so it's got some kind of connectivity to the pedestrian network. It's got some kind of speed control feature, and we'll talk about why that's so important today. So something to reduce the vehicle speeds to keep it safe. It's usually a flat top road hump, but there's some other ways to do that as well. And it has path priority using regulatory signs and line marking for path users. So this is the space in here where they all come together. That's what a raised crossing is in terms of the definition we're using. We also have to think about what is not a raised crossing. So both of these examples are not what we consider raised crossings in terms of what we're talking about in this course today. And that's because they don't give assigned priority to path users. So it's close, but it doesn't quite meet that criteria. If you look at this example here on the left, so I actually took my 8-year-old son, we were walking along here, and I said, oh, what do you think about this? You know, who has to give way? Do we need to give way as path users, or do the cars need to give way? And he looked at it and said, the cars need to give way. And so the line marking, the fact that the crossing's raised, it all seems to suggest that, yeah, the cars do have to give way. But if you read the detail, it's these signs and things are popping up to tell us to give way, which obviously if we're in a relaxed mode, we're not going to be thinking about that. So often when we don't assign priority, we get these little signs popping up, and they're kind of signs of ambiguity around how the crossing's working. And we'll see that in this example too, look left and things. So that's the rationale for that. Move on. So action time, we're just going to put that into practice for a minute. So we've got some quite judgmental little wombats here. So this is our happy wombat, thumbs up, and this is our not so happy wombat, thumbs down. So I'm going to put up some examples, and I just want you to use the chat. Have we got the symbols in the chat, the wombats up and wombats down? So you can either do a yes or a no, good, bad, or if you can find a thumbs up, thumbs down, let us know. Okay, we ready?
The wombats aren't in the chat, so they just have to write thumbs up, thumbs down, or good,
Okay.
bad.
Right, what about this one? Is this a wombat crossing? I mean a wombat crossing. Is this a race crossing? How's that? How are we going, Hafez? Are they?
No, we're going no, thumbs down, sad.
Go down. What does that judge me? Yeah, our wombat agrees. He's like, no, that is not a race crossing. And we've got this little kind of indicator sign saying, yep, we've got some ambiguity going on here, so we'll put a sign up there. What about this one?
I'm thinking, oh, this one is, people are loving it, like thumbs up. Yes,
thumbs up, thumbs up. No ambiguity at all.
And
Great.
some people say we're missing signs here.
Which side? Not sure about that. Okay, this one? No. That give way sign is just for the intersecting road. This is actually a driveway, so technically the path users should have right of way. We've got just enough there that might suggest they do have right of way, but we've got nothing there that suggests to the drivers that the path users don't. So that's going to be a no with our judgmental little wombat. What about this one? I'm going to have to look a bit closely at this one.
Oh, people tell where it is as well. So that's how familiar people are with it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we've got a bit of ambiguity about this one. It is one. It's not so easy to see the regulatory signs and line marking from where we've taken the sign, but there's give way signs and line marking at the approach to each crossing, and there's a little plate underneath that reminds people it's to people walking and cycling. So that's no. What about this one? No. Yep, so obviously this one is not raised. It's interesting. You can see in the background here, we've got a little speed platform. If we put that in front of the crossing, then we would have some kind of speed control feature. So even though it's not a raised crossing, it is something that really kind of would meet those three attributes if it was on the approaches to the crossing, which obviously it's not here. So no, but it wouldn't take much to improve it and make it close to. Why is the speed hump there? Yeah, that's a good question. There's a roundabout just there. I imagine entry speeds to the roundabout were a problem. If you put it a bit further up the road, you'd protect the most vulnerable users as well. So that would have been a better site for it. Okay, judgmental wombat. Okay, so where are we now? So we're going to do a bit of a reflection on the walks we did. So we've got some of the data out of the survey that you did. What I've done is I've just chosen a couple of sites from the surveys, from people's walks, to look at where, as practitioners, are we thinking about putting crossings in at this point in time, acknowledging we haven't done our WHERE class yet, and we're just at the start of this kind of journey. So someone is going to have to tell me where this is in New Zealand. I've drawn it down to South Island. But this was an interesting site. So what we're seeing here is the results from one of the participants' walks. So the little green symbols, they show where raised crossings could be considered, and the red symbols show where there's risks. So what we're seeing along here is that we're thinking about putting them on, you see, Side roads, which is consistent with a lot of the data that I've collected in my projects. We see that side roads consistently come up as a point of concern. We're seeing a suggestion for a major road there. We've got that one's supposed to be on the community commercial centres, so around the commercial centres. So I just wanted to show these because it shows how hopefully it was fairly easy to fill out this survey and we can get really specific information. Obviously in this class, everybody's living in different places, so we're not going to get kind of a data set to say, hey, what are the most important places, but we can get very specific sites and compare the sites between participants. Now, hang on. So I didn't have the second one in there. So some other interesting results from our survey. So we asked you to tick the boxes of places you, hang on, that's not the right heading there. We asked you what you were thinking about when you were identifying your crossing sites on your walks. I apologise, that says in Swan Hill, that's not the right heading, but I did just have to get all the data from this survey in. So when you were on your walks, what were you thinking about? And I find this really interesting. So most practitioners, down the bottom, we've got the percentage of survey respondents who were thinking about those things. So road safety and places, I think a raised crossing would improve safety. Places I've noticed people having difficulties crossing the roads. I like that because it's not just thinking about yourself, it's noticing what others are doing. My own experiences crossing roads in my neighbourhood, how it feels, that's really important too. Places children might have trouble. So most people are thinking about that. Places where elderly people and vision impaired or people with mobility or cognitive impairment might have problems. We've got about half of people thinking about that. Places in my community that everyone might need to access. So again, thinking about others. I tried to avoid putting on busy roads. I quite like that we had less than half of participants saying that, because often busy roads are the places where we really need crossings and we need to kind of change those environments so we can at least consider raised crossings because they're such a strong treatment, at least consider them, and we can consider something else if we can't get them in there. Types of places and roads raised crossings are typically installed on, and only a few people were thinking about that, which I really like too, because it means that we're thinking about new places, not just what we've done in the past. And obviously in making our towns more walkable and safer, we need to be thinking about new places. So anyway, I thought we had some really interesting results there. Anyone else wants to comment? So just to summarize, I'm going pretty quickly. The reason we did that task is we wanted to give you a chance of being the survey participant, to be able to go out there, experience your neighbourhood, think about where places feel safe and unsafe and what you'd do if you could. Be able to provide that information to someone in a really easy place. We like to give you lots of options to identify lots of different sites. You shouldn't just have to choose one site where it feels unsafe. You should be able to choose as many as you want, or your top 10 or something like that. We wanted to capture pre-existing ideas about where practitioners think that we should be installing these crossings and where there's a need for risk and connection, and also thinking about, what members, thinking about different members of the community and just reflecting on ourselves and saying, hey, was I thinking about just me, and how is my lived experience influencing how I'm thinking about things? So bringing our data together is a really good way of questioning them. Okay, have we got any questions in there that we need to get to quickly, or shall I keep going on?
I'll keep going, Prue. We've got a couple of questions and answered by beautiful Bridget here. Thank you.
Oh, this is fantastic. I can keep going, and we've got the expert panel answering questions. Cool.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so now we're going to go on to where are raised crossings needed in greenfield areas. Now, where are they needed? We're looking for kind of two criteria here, and the place between these, which is where there's risk and where there's connection. So if there's risk of people being injured by vehicles, but also where they need those connections. So to understand where there's risk, we're going to be applying safe system principles today. And that's our defined approach for how we approach road safety in Australia and New Zealand. We have this overall road safety vision that no one will be killed or seriously injured as a result of road crashes. So when we're thinking about risk, we're really tying it to those overarching objectives. When we're thinking about connection, we're thinking about our networks, we're thinking about the origins and destinations, we're thinking about those movement in place frameworks, where are their design lines, and public transport is a really good one to focus on in terms of how we're getting people there. Right, so risk. I think, I don't know if we mentioned, but I'm from Queensland. So obviously a crocodile is a good way to depict risk in this part of the world. If there's something else in your part of the world, be more than happy to hear it. Yeah, be interesting to see that what other people would use. So risk. So we're going to talk about the safe system principles, and these are 5 sustainable safety principles. They've been defined in promoting safe system in the planning process. I've been referring to them for a few years now, and I find they're a really good kind of test that I can keep in my head to kind of understand a site and work out if it is risky, if it's not risky, and why, what elements or part of the design is causing that. Had coffee. Melburnians. Okay, so there's 5 principles here. Now, you know, this doesn't have to be the way we do it. We've got the Safe System Assessment Framework is a fantastic method. I use that in a lot of situations as well, depending on what sites. And there's there's principles around inclusivity and walkability that you can apply as well. So it's about finding a set of principles that work well for you, but I've found these are really kind of good structure for assessing and understanding risk. So there's 5 principles: functionality, homogeneity, predictability, state of awareness, and forgivingness. And we're going to go through those now. So functionality is about acknowledging that we define our roads in a functional, our streets and roads in a functional hierarchy. So typically we have arterial roads, which are really about a through function. It's about getting people from A to B by different whatever mode they're using. At the opposite end of the spectrum, we have local streets, and they really have an access or an exchange function. So if you think about people going into driveways, into houses and properties, so we've got movements going in different directions, and that's really the priority in this situation. In between, we have collector roads. Now, they have a through function for mid-block, but they have an access or an exchange function at intersections. So we're really concentrating on one of these 2 priorities at each location in the network. That's in a perfect world, but we've got lots of sections of network that really aren't a perfect world. And we've got what we call grey roads, where they're really trying to be a through function and an exchange function. And I'm sure you can think of an example in your area where it's a really busy road. It's probably defined as an arterial. You've got driveways, you've got shops, you've got all sorts of other things going on as well. So in that situation where we can't kind of achieve this kind of single function road, we aim to provide adequate safety with safe speeds. And that's where things like raised crossings can be really useful, because they can make a space in the traffic for people, and they can actively lower the vehicle speeds as well. So that's the first criteria. We refer back to that to work out, you know, in terms of the functional hierarchy, is this a place where we'd be considering a raised crossing? The next principle is homogeneity. And homogeneity, I put this sign here. It's basically, we want to separate big, fast stuff from small, slow stuff. When you put those things together, we're going to have problems. We also, at higher speeds, we want to have equality in the speed and the direction and the mass of the users. So if we have a look at this site here, this is actually a pedestrian refuge. It's used by school kids. What do we think about in terms of the homogeneity of this facility? There's no answer. There's not going to be any answers, but you can put answers in the thing. So obviously it's not going particularly well. We've got exchange movements happening, and we've got very, high speeds and high mass here in this. So basically, where we can't separate things, we need to reduce the speed so that we're protecting the most vulnerable road users in that situation. So again, the speed is permeating through all of these principles, because that's the protective measure we can do if it's not perfect. So in this example, what we're doing is we've got this is where vehicles and path users will need to come into contact, and so we reduce the vehicle speeds to create a slow mixing environment where they come into contact. So that's the homogeneity principle. Predictability is all about users being able to predict their own path of travel and the path of travel of others. So we've got a bit of a video here, and it's being able to predict that path of travel in time to avoid a crash if it could occur. So if you just look at the top left-hand side of the video, you're about to see a couple of kids come riding down the hill. So if these kids maintain their speed across this side road, they can get, I'll just play it again. If they maintain their speed across the side road, they can basically get all the way to school without pedaling. So there's fair incentive for them to do that. But if you think about what's going on at that intersection, is even though the children have right of way from vehicles that might turn into that intersection, if any of those vehicles was going to turn in, would the child be able to react in time to prevent a crash? Does our road design remind the drivers that they need to give way as they're entering that intersection? It's not going to be predictable to the children which cars are going straight and which ones are going to turn into that road. So these are the things that we think about with predictability. So this is an example of a race crossing installed at a side road. And it's been next to a school. And these side roads, even if you look through some of the other criteria, you know, they're not high speeds. We don't have a lot of heavy vehicles, but the predictability criteria is really bad unless we define these crossings, because at these school zones, we've got lots of parents parking in the side streets. We've got really vulnerable road users, and it's really not obvious which vehicles are going to go into the side streets. So by doing this, we're reducing those vehicle speeds. We're making it really obvious where the children are going to cross. We're making sure we don't have parked vehicles right where the kids are going to be stepping out. And we're really improving that predictability. And I spoke to one of the parents afterwards, and they said it's 1,000 times better than it was. So this has popped up on nearly every school survey I've done, that people are really concerned about side roads. Now I've put there's a link to the YouTube video, but because it was around a school, it's a local school, we made a little video as well. One of the features with the crossing, having the yellow crossing, was about having a really good contrast to the ramps. The yellow is also similar enough to the footpath that it looks like part of the footpath network. It's also used in Melbourne, but it was also really important to have a colour that was identifiable, so we could communicate to children, hey, where it's yellow, look out for cars. And that's something that I noticed with my children. If you can say something like, when we're on a bikeway, where it's green, you need to check for cars. But it's good because they're the backup. They're not the cars have to give way, but they're the backup, not the main source of decision making. So this is just some extracts of those videos, so being really explicit about those messages. So just again, the next one, and the state of awareness and predictability can overlap a little bit, but state of awareness is really about admitting that humans have cognitive limitations. There's only so much information that people can take in at one time before people are more likely to make mistakes. So if we think of this example, this is before that raised crossing was installed. So if we think of a child about to cross the road here, first thing they have to think about is whether a vehicle is going to come from behind them. If they're on a bike, that's going to be pretty difficult. Then they're going to have to think of these vehicles that might be turning right from in front of them. And then they're going to have to think of vehicles exiting from this side road. So that's 1, 2, 3 movements. So what is 1, 2, 3? So we're relying on the path user, and we have to think that the path user may not be able to see. They may be in a wheelchair. They may have limited movement in terms of being able to turn their head, especially if you're in a wheelchair or something like that. You can't use your whole body to turn around. They might be drunk. We don't have the same kind of reliability in terms of when we're trusting path users. I've just got this little video, and it just kind of demonstrates this point. This is my son, and he's about 8 at the time, and we've practiced this crossing a lot, but I'll just kind of talk you through what's going on. So I'm standing on the other side. He's checking up the road to see if there's a gap in traffic. He actually has to wait till the crossing supervisor stops the traffic altogether because he can't see past that car. So he's checked that. Then he has to check down the other road, which we always forget. And then I've pulled out because he's remembered the right turn movements, he's forgotten the cars coming out the street. And so I've stepped out to kind of protect him there. So it's that 1 movement, 2 movement, and then failing on the 3rd movement. Yeah, so 1 movement, he got this one, he got this right turn one, which is the one it is easier to forget, but then he forgot this one. One other thing too, I might have got a bit carried away with the state of awareness, and this is my most complicated slide, but I just thought it was really interesting, and I think these studies were done 1998, and I couldn't believe I didn't know about it till now. But basically, this graph shows the amount of buffer time a child left before they'd cross the road in front of a motor vehicle. And the studies basically, I've got links to those studies so you can have a look at it. But basically what it's saying is these are the vehicle speeds across the bottom. When vehicles were going 0 to 50 kilometres an hour, the kids would leave 2 to 3 seconds buffer time. And that would be the time between if they started crossing the road and they finished, and then a car would come along. I think that's a pretty good buffer. I think that's pretty reasonable. 2 or 3 seconds, and then you'd probably have a fairly high chance of serious injury or death. As the vehicle speeds got higher, the safety buffer gets lower. So up at over 65 kilometres an hour, less than a second. So where we're using these refuge treatments and things, people can't judge an accurate gap in traffic. What they do is they judge by how far away the vehicle is, not by how much time it takes to get there. So the faster the vehicles go, the less accurate we are. And our standards are a little bit backwards in that regard, because we say over 60 kilometres an hour, you have to use 60 and over, you have to use a refuge crossing. Well, that's when you really can't rely on your pedestrians to choose that safe gap. So there's a bit more reading to do there, but hopefully I've managed to communicate that point, that it was worth making. Now,
Prue,
yes.
Before we finish the forgiveness, I want to create a pause here. We've got a couple of questions. One of them is about signing and, the clutter of signing. And I think we're going to address them more fully in module 4, Ken.
Yeah, I'm going to cover off signage.
Beautiful. So, Naomi, we're going to be coming back to you in module 4 and give you more information about that. We've got a question about the paintings of some of these treatments. Are they, so is there a standard around them? Are they slippery? Like a bit of more information on them, please.
Yeah, no, having those non-slip is really important. They are a non-slip surface. The humps I showed are asphalt. You need to be a little bit more careful with concrete because there can be some more problems in terms of the slipperiness in that example. So a coloured concrete would be good, but getting a really good contrast in that is a bit harder. So yeah, definitely need to be confident in the pavement treatment that is something that is specified. Okay, off my most complicated slide. Okay, so forgivingness. We've seen again and again that speed is permeating through how we manage risk. So we've got some really good information about that. Forgivingness is all about making sure that the crashes don't result in serious injury or death. And it's really, I've just put this in red, if everything else fails and a crash does happen, under a safe system, we may need to make sure that doesn't result in a serious injury or death. So it's kind of like it will reduce the likelihood of crashes occurring, but it will also reduce those consequences. So it's just imperative to all of this. There's a few of these different graphs around. They're really, really useful. So basically what these lines represent is the impact speed if a vehicle crashes into for different types of crashes. So this black line is a car hitting a pedestrian or a bike ride. This purple line over here is a rear end crash. And what it says is basically if that happens, if a vehicle hits someone walking at 20 kilometres an hour, there's about a 10% chance of a serious injury or a fatality. If we take it up to about 50 kilometres an hour, we've got a 90% chance of serious death or injury. Sorry. There is injury or death. So we see how over between 20 and 30 kilometres an hour, this graph just goes straight up. So every time when we're looking about implementing safe system principles, we won't necessarily be able to get to our critical impact speeds, but we need to do as much as we can to get there. And these 30 kilometre an hour is kind of our magic number that we're really aiming for in terms of when pedestrians are coming into contact with motor vehicles. Just want to give you show you the purple line here, because with raised crossings, a common crash type that people are concerned about is rear end crashes, because we're going to be slowing vehicles down. Raised crossings are really good at reducing the likelihood of that, because they're slowing all the vehicles down. If you just have a flat crossing, then we're going to be seeing more sudden braking is more likely. But the critical impact speed for a rear end crash is 55 kilometers an hour. So if we put the raised crossing in, we're usually going to be having speeds less than 55 kilometers to start with. And so we're going to be keeping under that critical impact speed. So putting in a facility for these road users is actually going to protect these road users as well, and these road users as well. It can have multiple benefits. We got any questions about that? First time I've seen a rear. Yeah, they're not, the rear end crashes aren't on all the graphs, but it's important to consider it. And I think it's a really interesting part of the puzzle. Most, it comes up again and again, and it's always, one of the things I'm thinking about when I'm recommending these treatments. Okay, so it's fairly dense, that section, but we've gone through functionality, homogeneity, predictability, state of awareness, and forgivingness. Now, I talked about that kind of A3 cheat sheet that just kind of goes through this this session, the whole session, and it's got this on there. It's also got a bit of a kind of a checklist how you could use that on your site. So we're going to do a poll now. We're going to do a bit of an activity now. So what we're going to do, and we're going kind of straight into advanced, I think, but anyway, we'll be good. We're going to watch this video. And then we are going to fill out this, our poll will come up on your screens. First time we've done this, sorry, in this session. And you're going to answer how you feel about each of these criteria. So the criteria in the table, intersection provides a clear through or access function for all users. So we're just going to rate how we feel about each of this criteria with what's going on here now. So the first one is about, does it provide that through access, or does it provide that access function, what's going on. So I'll just put the video on. He's lost concentration. Again. Okay, are we going to start the poll now? Handing over to the team. Aha.
Beautiful. We've got it here. And as you put in your answers, you're going to see your own answers. But when we got some like stability happening with the results, we're going to share that with you. So please put in your answers. I love this.
Oh, Brian, you can't see the video. Just seen that. Okay, you've just got to imagine a lot of vehicles going and children trying to cross the road for quite a long time.
Ken, can you see the results?
Yes.
Oh.
So they're coming in. We've got about half participants have put in and they're coming up. So I'm not sure. So you're not.
Lachlan's not seeing a poll, but
Occasionally a firewall in a department will block that the poll from popping up. So it should be there and you should be able to move it around your screen, hopefully, but it's not critical. You're not marked on it or anything like that. It's just to give an indication of how we're looking. So I think we're getting close to a point where we'll stop it.
yeah. Oh,
Well,
there you go, Lachlan.
how about we do 5 more seconds?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
5, 4,
Gonna have to speed up, everyone.
3, 2, 1. And we've ended the poll and sharing the results.
Okay, provides a clear. Yeah, cool. Well, I'm pretty happy with this. Well, sorry, I've just read that. Yes, it provides a through access function or a clear through or access function. It's one of the trickier criteria, this one, and I think we've picked up on that really well. So most people are disagreeing with it. I've talked to the council and it's classified as a subarterial road. So apparently, I'm not sure what that means. Well, in the past, that would mean you can't put any raised platforms on it. So obviously it is also providing an access function. We've got through movements, we've got access movements because we've got driveways there, we've got a desire line for people crossing the road, and it's not really providing for both of those movements. It's only providing really for through movements, and it's not. We could probably look at this in terms of our functional hierarchy. It's kind of like the collector where we might have a through function. It's actually one of those grey roads. So in that situation, we really need to reduce those speeds to make it safe for the most vulnerable road users. Speeds are similar where users might interact. The deflection on this roundabout is particularly poor. So it's hard to tell in the video, but we get really high speeds coming down here. You can see there's not a lot of deflection, and the same going north. It's just a 3-leg roundabout. Yep, it's got a 60 kilometre posted speed, and they're probably going through, some users are probably going through at 60. So it's easy to predict the path of users. We've got most people disagreeing, because what's pretty difficult about this is that other people crossing don't have enough time to work out whether vehicles coming down this road are continuing to turn right or they're going to come down this road. So roundabouts are an example where it can be really difficult to predict which users are going to be exiting the roundabout, which vehicles are going to be exiting the roundabout. So roundabouts actively reduce vehicle speeds, which is really good, but for path users, it's that predictability principle that can often fail. So inexperienced users are not relied upon to judge complex environments. So I would say that we are relying on inexperienced users to judge this. We're 100% reliant on them, really. So the people crossing the road, they don't have priority across over the traffic. We also have a lot of people here who are vision, that we see in mobility scooters and wheelchairs, and those people have difficulty. They have to actually turn their wheelchair so they're facing the traffic. Crashes are not likely to cause serious injuries or fatalities. So most people disagree with that, and you can see from those speeds and the users that we're looking at there that it's probably. So that's just an example of how we can implement those sustainable safety principles, and they're not the most simple principles, but once you've kind of got the hang of them, you can reuse them and pull them out and just have a mental checklist. So I find it really helpful for understanding how something's working and picking up on the weak points. Yes. Well, we're now going to go to our next video. So we're going to do the same thing, and we're going to be experts at it this time. So we're going to watch a video again, and then we're going to watch a poll, and we're going to fill out the same criteria. It's again a roundabout. Interestingly, and checking the traffic volumes, they seem to be fairly similar between these two roundabouts, and I was blown away by that. I felt that this one had a lot of volumes. Right, so we're going to bring up the poll again and see what we think about this one. Yeah, they're good guinea pigs, Kathy. Don't tell them. Actually, the younger one wrote to the council about the roundabout, and I've written to the council before, and they didn't listen to me. But when he wrote to them, the traffic engineer said, "Yeah, we agree," and put a raised crossing in the program. So they're good little advocates. I said, "I don't mind about parking."
Ken, we're in your
Okay.
Yes. Remember, you say stabilize, we can stop.
Yeah, so we'll give it another 5 seconds on this one.
Yeah.
Cool.
Three, two, one, and end poll.
Okay.
Okay, let's share the results.
Oh, look at that. It provides a clear through or access function for all users. So we've got most people agreeing with that. I would agree with that. I think we've got a lot of pedestrian movements, which is actually really, we've got very explicit facilities for those, but we're also providing for those exchange movements in terms of the vehicles as well in that low speed environment. Speeds are similar where users might interact. So we've got most people agreeing with that. So the raised platforms at the approaches to all sides of the roundabout, it works really well if the raised platforms are on each side of the roundabout, because then all the vehicles are approaching at a similar speed, and it's protecting the path users before the deflection of the roundabout as well. So that's good. Easy to predict the path of travel of users. So yeah, it's a little bit weaker on that one, but it's more predictable. We've opened up time for people to see each other, and we've made it very clear where the path of travel was. And we did see that the people walking were sticking to those crossings. There's not a lot of people going to other places because they can get a gap there. Inexperienced users are not relied upon to judge complex environments. Agree. So we've got some people agreeing and some people not agreeing there with that one, but about half of people agree. So if we compare it to the other one, so in this situation, the regulatory signs and line marking says that the path users have right of way. So we're not 100% reliant on those inexperienced users. If that driver makes a mistake, then we want the path users to be looking as well, but we're not 100% reliant on them in that situation. We've got questions about that. Compact roundabout, great. And crashes are not likely to result in serious injuries or deaths. So yeah, we've got more people agreeing with that as well. We've certainly actively reduced the vehicle speeds, whether we've got them to, below 30 kilometres an hour or not, not sure, but it's certainly they're being actively reduced. So that's what we're working towards. Okay, well, we will move on. I think we're right. So we've talked about risk, and now we're going to move on to connection. We're not going to go into as much detail for connection. So as we mentioned before, what we want to do is find out where these two places overlap, and then look at those places for crossing sites. And I guess one of the kind of assumptions behind this is that because raised crossings are such a strong treatment, they're such an effective treatment, and they're cheaper than many other treatments, and they provide for all users, they're one of the first treatments we go to. So looking at where we need crossings and then looking them at one of the first treatment options is a great way to start there. So here we're looking at that origin destination, movement in place, desire lines, and public transport. So does anyone recognise where this heat map might be taken from? Anyone got an idea? Nice work, Chris. Most of you have seen it because you've done the homework. So
I think
this is
Chris
Swanhill.
gets a prize for that.
Yeah, I think so too. There's really attention to detail, don't think. Good job, Chris. So I knew you were familiar with this site because you've done the homework, so I just chose that. This is a Strava heat map, and I've just filtered it for people walking or running. So Strava is a fitness app that people can use to map where they're walking or riding. So it doesn't tell us where everybody's going, but I like to use it as a first point of call to say, where are people going in this neighborhood? And just because they've definitely been there if it's appearing on the map. But what I take out from this map is that people are going to a lot of places. They're going most streets, if not all streets, and they're crossing at most intersections and possibly at mid-block as well. There's a lot of demand for crossing facilities. If we think about our walking and cycling traffic networks, walking trips are shorter than driving. So we need at least as many connections as we do for vehicles. So intersections, mid-block, side roads, and between attractors, we need a lot of connections. So where is connection needed? What might that look like if we had some kind of subdivision or some kind of town? Where might it be needed? And in certain situations, we're not going to be able to use raised crossings, but we need to think about a lot of different places where it might be needed. So it may not be raised crossings at all these sites, but we need to be looking at managing that risk wherever that is that risk, and acknowledging that we need a lot of connection. Roundabouts, that's a place where we have those problems with predictability. I think often bus routes is something too that we underestimate how difficult the crossing task is for people to get to public transport. So we always need to be thinking of those as paired for the two trips, and how we get people between. So we've got another activity now. This bit's a bit dense with activities, but so basically we're going to go to the Miro board. So if you get your Miro board link going. How do I bring the Miro board up? What does someone do? Hang on, just got to do that. My Miro board. Anyway, I'll get you going before I put the Miro board up. So what we're doing is you're managing an application for a subdivision east of a town centre. So out here, we've got a new development. The site is expected to double the traffic volumes on the road connecting into the town. So we're going to have a whole lot of new houses out here. This is the town centre, and we're going to have a whole lot more traffic coming along here. We want you to think about where you might install pedestrian crossings as a result of this subdivision, as part of this subdivision approval. Use a sticky note on the Miro board to show the locations you might consider a raised crossing. It'd be good if you put your initials on the sticky note and a comment explaining why it's needed or why you're going to be conditioning that kind of thing. Now, let me just check my screen.
So I see your board quite swarmed with people. Lots of people are going around. So it is beautiful, chaotic.
Is this going to overwhelm people if my Miro board is up as well as theirs? Anyway.
So is there any specific area on your board you want people to focus on? Is Action Time the growing network, is it?
Yes, let's have a look. Hang on, I'm just trying to zoom in. There we go. So we've got, so you've grabbed a sticky note. Everybody's familiar with how to do that. So we've got, yeah, what we're thinking about, I like this. We're thinking about this side road and this existing pathway network. So putting that on the side road, Wombat on the side road, continuing pathway, another one here. Yep. another one over here on this crossing as well. So you can just drag a sticky note there, might be easiest.
Prue, do you want me to share the board? Yeah, for you?
Oh, can't you see my board?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, hang on. Oh, hang on, I'll do it again. There we
Yes,
go.
we're
Thank you for picking up on that.
Sure.
Right, so this is good. We're seeing people thinking about putting a facility on the major road as well as the side roads. And I guess that was one of the points I wanted to make with this exercise. When we put more traffic into a network, the existing gaps in the traffic flow might have previously been enough for people to get across the road safely. But once we start adding more vehicles, it actually becomes harder for people to pick a gap. And I think we do that really well with our new development applications and things for vehicles. We think about, you know, modeling each of the intersections, saying if they're going to work, but we don't necessarily pick up on the need to actually put in the improvements to the pedestrian and cycle networks to get those people across those roads when it gets busier. What do people think about that? Got any comments about that?
While that happens, I think there might be 2 Miro boards running, one that doesn't have all of this. It might be.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think there's quite a number of
Yeah.
people in another Miro board.
Okay, well, let's just get the link. Share and board link.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm just trying to get into the chat. I'm trying to get back into the chat. Ah, here it is. Okay, if you're having problems, there's no earlier still loading it. Right. So in module 1, oh yes, it's all on the one board. So you can zoom out and you can zoom in. Module 1 is up the top there. If you zoom out and then you zoom down and you get to the module 2. So it's all on the one board, but we're building below it.
Right. Okay. Thank you. That'll answer a few people's questions, I think, which is causing some trouble. They're still up, so you have to, scroll quite a bit further down.
Well, I'm glad it wasn't a real life site visit where we lost half the class, and this is the advantage of being online. Okay, I think we've had a look at that there. That was the point I was trying to make, and to give us an example of thinking not just about what's happening in the development, but that's fantastic to be doing that, but to think about this as a continuous network, and that the pedestrian network can really be downgraded just by adding more vehicles to it. That's what we're actually doing it. So we need to compensate for that, and Wombat crossings are certainly a treatment that we keep in mind.
Yeah, that's a great summary. I think, Prue, we've got a question here, a couple of questions here. People asking about, is there any provision on the distance between each crossing? There are cases that, people have to put crossing after a flyover. What is a safe distance to put a crossing?
After a flyover, is that? Yeah. I'm going to put that off to to Ken. We'll talk about some of the rules that govern where you can put crossings in about the speed environments. There's also some guidance about how closely to space your crossings or your speed control devices to achieve a certain speed limit on a road. So often we try to put them a maximum distance apart to keep a fairly consistent travel speed. But we'll look at some of the rules in the second half of this session about where we can put them in. And it's more going to be about the speed environment than the proximity to something, I think.
Great. Ken, do you have anything to add to that?
I'd be interested in that scenario. I mean, traditionally a flyover, as well, what I feel a flyover is a vehicle flyover, as in a grade separated, and it's sort of quite an odd scenario to have a sort of major traffic road landing at a pedestrian priority crossing. So maybe if I got a bit more detail on that one, I can have a look into it.
Yeah, so maybe Estiara, could you please, like in the LMS, share the question with a photo or some information, and then Prue and Ken can get back to yourself with answering that question.
The question that's just come in around how far from a roundabout, I'll definitely cover, and I think Prue might even touch on that as well. So that's going to get a lot of attention.
Yeah.
Terrific. Prue, back to you.
Guess what? We are at a 5-minute break in perfect time.
Oh, this is perfect timing, and we're actually on the mid, like almost on the hour. So we're taking 5-minute break. I will be back a minute earlier to get ready for the second part. Prue,
you can have that, you know, I think we come back at yes, maybe 5 minutes, or yeah, that will be. Is that enough, everybody?
I think yes.
You just got to be decisive in this role, don't you? Okay, 5-minute break. Off you go. See you in a minute. Okay. Right. So we've been through greenfield sites, and now we're going to be looking at where to install crossings in brownfield sites. There's not a whole lot of specific or explicit guidance about where to install crossings in brownfield sites. I think Ken made the comment in one of our sessions that there's a lot of guidance on where not to install them. But in terms of where to install them, we're going to be talking about some methodologies that we can use to do that. When we're talking about brownfield sites, we're no longer solving a theoretical problem. This is an actual problem. There's stuff on the ground, and it's a problem that people are already finding workarounds to. People are living in these places. They're working. They're going to school. They're trying to recreate, get kids to the park. People are really familiar with these environments. So instead of being where are crossings needed in brownfield sites, I like to think of it as where are they most needed, because our communities need us to use this money really sensibly and wisely and put it where it's most needed. So that's our challenge in this part of the session. We are also adding in another criteria. So we've got risk, connection, and we've got feasibility here. So we need to be thinking about what kind of sites can we actually realistically get them in, so that hence the flying pig. So in this, we've already talked about risk and connection. So now we're talking about feasibility, and I'm hoping perhaps it's a world first in terms of going from flying pigs to Australian standards. What do you think? I think that's a fairly good transition that possibly hasn't been done before. So anyway, back to the regulatory control systems and feasibility. So the first thing we talk about with feasibility is the rules. So we've got the rule book on where we can put these crossings in. So we need to make sure that we are familiar with that. So for pedestrian crossings, that's governed by Australian Standard 1742.10, which is the pedestrian standard. So it says you shall use this line marking, and you shall do this and you shan't do that. For shared paths and for bikeways, we have rules in the bicycle standard. So what does it say? Basically, it says in the pedestrian standard, it basically says no more than one moving lane in traffic in any direction. So it says that you can't do this. In terms of speed limits, it says that the speed limits on approach must be no more than 50 kilometres an hour. So you can't do this. Lots of information about where we can't install crossings. And the 85th percentile speed needs to be less than 60. So we can do it in this kind of environment. This is what the rule book says. Queensland has recently published some guidance that is very explicit about for roundabouts, because of that predictability issue, and also because the roundabouts don't slow the vehicle speeds before the roundabout where the pedestrians need it. They've introduced some explicit guidance about we will put them in on roundabouts. So we'll put raised crossings in on new roundabouts, and that's in posted speed limits of 60 kilometres an hour. So they have the similar, similar guidance to what's used for slip lanes. But also, so in this situation, you can put them in. So it's something to keep in mind that's a tip. If you've got a road that's more than 50 kilometres an hour, introducing a roundabout provides road safety benefits for everyone, and it allows you to put these crossings in. It creates that lower speed part of the network. In Queensland guidance, you can put them in if it's posted 70 kilometres an hour. But there's limits on how fast the vehicle speeds can be at this crossing points, and then we further reduce that with the design of our crossings. So I'll again defer back to Ken, who will go into the crossing ramps and the crossing gradients and things. But these are some of the rules we need to know about for feasibility. Now, I don't want to kind of ruin all the fun with the feasibility rules because it says you can't put them in those higher speed roads. That's why we need to defer back to those safe system principles we were talking about. We talk about those issues with the grey roads where we've got them trying to provide an access function and a movement function. And if they're trying to do too many things, they get riskier. So we need to reduce those speeds to create a safe environment for all the uses of the road, the functions of the road. So I'd encourage you not to just give up in these situations. If you've got a 60-kilometre-an-hour road, it's about trying to get that reviewed to be a 50-kilometre-an-hour road. If you need to look at higher treatment options, if you can't get raised crossings in, there's some other situations Ken might go into about what to do with the multi-lane roads as well. And also think about, okay, can we put a roundabout in which has road safety benefits for a whole variety of users and things. So yeah, don't take the rules as stop here, take the rules as your next challenge for how to create that safer environment. Any questions there?
I think there's an observation, Prue, here, and you actually addressed the question, the relationship between regulations, rules, and actually the reality of safety and mobility for pedestrians. And you covered that, I think, quite beautifully. I just like open maybe for the other panel members to comment on that, because this is actually very interesting. But Ken, Bridget, what do you reckon?
No, I just think it takes just many decades to change standards and guidelines, and a lot of them were developed and road rules were developed in an age where motorized mobility was the go-to thing, and we don't think like that anymore. So it's going to be a big lag in us pulling all of that in line, and so we just, exactly as Prue says, work around what is existing and lobby and advocate for changes.
I think it's also important to point out that we don't just blindly apply standards and guidelines anywhere. Otherwise, we wouldn't need training, we wouldn't need degrees, we wouldn't need experience. And the whole point of having you smart people engaged in this topic is that it's all about the context of the specific place and the people in the community and the transport and all the different modes together. So there's no one blank template from a guide that you can apply to any real street, and that's why we're here.
Exactly. And also, I would say duty of care. We all have duty of care to sort of, our pedestrians. A very specific question for you, Prue, here. If retrofitting a race crossing at the roundabout, do we have to install them on all legs for consistency? What do you reckon?
It's best to install them on all legs because then the optimal outcome is to have them on all legs. It can help in terms of all the vehicles that are then approaching at that similar kind of speed. But I've certainly seen them done just on some legs as well. It's just making sure that you've got appropriate entry speeds to the crossing. And then what we generally rely on the crossing to do is wipe another 20 kilometres an hour off that speed. And especially if, you've got some very narrow approaches to the roundabout, they may not be needed to be raised crossings on every leg if you've already got the very low speeds.
Exactly. And before passing the floor to you, Prue, I want to sort of maybe echo what Brian said here. We are changing the culture from motor vehicles to more active travel, and just like addressing all of that. I think all of us here are like converted. So I think I encourage you all to go out there and convince other people to do that. So Prue, the floor is yours.
I like Lachlan's comment here too. Blindly following standards isn't a great defence when fronting a coronial environment. Okay.
Ken, this is first prize for Prue for making a good joke.
Oh, okay, so other feasibility considerations. So session 4 will go into these things about sightlines, drainage, cost, practitioner and organisational experiences. I think we've just talked about that, and some of our survey results really kind of highlighted that as an issue too. It's kind of practitioner experience with standards can actually hold us back from embracing a vision and higher standard of treatment. I've just got this doesn't make a lot of sense here, but this snapshot here is out of the TMR raised priority crossings guideline. And I've put it in as an example of how we can get over that practitioner and organisational experiences. Before they developed their guideline, TMR actually did conducted some observational studies. So they went out to different sites that had raised crossings at side roads, and they looked at how they were functioning and mapped a whole lot of movements between people riding and vehicles. And these kind of studies can give practitioners confidence to know how these facilities work when they haven't seen them themselves. So I know for me that was quite compelling data around, oh yes, I've got the confidence to recommend these now. And that's the first study they did had a site that didn't have a raised crossing in it, and looked at those movements as well. So we may not be able to achieve the perfect world at all these sites, but we want, if we're making a lot better than it is now or a lot safer than it is now, then that's something we can potentially justify, or not justify not doing. Okay, so I said before we didn't have really explicit guidance for where to put raised crossings in. So what we're really talking about this section is about methodologies for where in brownfield. Now I've got 3 methodologies that I'm going to go through today, and I've chosen these methodologies because they are relatively straightforward, and that's really important because we are trying to create change. So we need to have a process that's really straightforward that we can tell our decision makers, and those decision makers can tell other people. So it's that repeatable story that we use to get change. They're also easy to implement. So we don't just want to be able to see these in really big organizations, but if you have minimal staff and you don't have a lot of people to run these projects and things, you know, you can run a program on this with minimal resources. And because they kind of can tell a story. So in terms of our 3 methodologies, we're also going to have a look at how they go in terms of identifying places with risk, with connection, and with that are feasible. And really, when we're looking at new sites, we really want to be going in where these all overlap, ideally. Okay, so the first methodology for identifying where is crossing upgrades. So this is a really kind of simple and straightforward methodology that you could use to want to have, you know, to have a first cut of it. So existing crossings can represent places where people have already recognised there's demand for crossings, or networks have already been constructed around it and they're part of an important route. So often there's a history there about why that crossing was there, and we can go to those sites and we can look at it and we can use our criteria. We already know that there's connection, and we can go, what's the risk scenario here, and identify as that the site to upgrade. So it's a pretty transparent, kind of easy, repeatable way of identifying sites. So just in terms of, we've got our, I don't know, these thumbs up, but in terms of risk, you know, it does an okay job of doing risk, but there'll be some more practitioner work in that regard. Often it's a place where there's already some kind of demand for connection. And often it's feasible to look at these sites because we've already got sight lines, we've got lighting that we can upgrade. And so some of these conditions that we need for crossings have already been considered. When we're thinking about these sites as well, roundabouts are a really obvious place to look at our networks. As we said before, predictability can be a real weakness of roundabouts that haven't been treated. So it's an excellent way to reduce risk at roundabouts. We've already created that lower speed environment that's really compatible to a crossing. So if we think about installing crossings on a roundabout, if we have a 60-kilometre-an-hour road and someone's trying to cross it with no protection, the chances of serious injury or death are almost 100% if they get hit by a vehicle at full speed. When we have a roundabout, we've wiped off some of that speed, and so that might be down to 50 or 40, hopefully at the roundabout, and then we can put a crossing in and we're getting it down to 20 or 30. So we've got this huge safety improvement at the crossing point. So also, when we've got roundabouts, we'll often use them at junctions of 4-way intersections. So we've got lots of pedestrian and cycle routes coming together. So it can be a really good place to really improve that predictability and achieve, you know, really good outcomes in terms of risk and feasibility. So the next thing we can look at is established demand. And this is places where it's site observations kind of confirm demand. This can start off in a really ad hoc kind of way, at its most basic level, it's basically just practitioners saying, oh yes, we've got a lot of people crossing the road here. We need something better. But it can also be systematic, and similar to crossings, you can do a review of your network and identify all the crossing sites in your network and say, this is what we're going to concentrate, and then do the risk assessment of the existing crossings to look at upgrading them. You can do a similar process with established demand. You can make it systematic. So we look at town centres, we look at schools, places where there's a whole lot of needs to provide the safe movement. So start off with that kind of ad hoc level or make it more systematic, but at least you've simplified the problem to say, well, where are our areas that we know we have established demand? I've just been doing some work in Bundaberg in the last couple of days, and in those regional areas, the places where they have crowds are schools, really. In regional towns, we don't actually have really, really busy centres in some situations, but we have these crowding about our networks around schools. So that might be the strategy. Let's see. Oh, sorry, I didn't put those. So another thing to think about with established demand is public transport. So when we're looking at public transport, we can actually use the patronage data to say how much demand have we got at this site. So we can look at that and say these are our busiest sites, and we can be focusing on the areas that are busiest to start with. Or we can be using this data to say, hey, where have we got people who we might have elderly people or children using these facilities now most vulnerable, and focus it around there. So we've actually got something to guide us in terms of these are the most important sites to look at first. And remembering that, for many of these people, for many people using public transport, they don't have access to other means of transport. So it's essential, and under the Disability Discrimination Act, to provide access to public transport. And I'm surprised by how frequently I look at 2 bus stops on either side of a very busy road with no provision for how you could safely get people between those 2 bus stops. And yet, it's very commonly raised that, oh, we can't put a speed hump on a road hump on a bus route, but how can we not? How can we not provide for this connection? So that can be another area that can justify. Now, it doesn't have to be, really large, complex planning. It can be, it can be a big regional process, but I like these kind of methodologies because you can scale them up, for big cities, or you can scale them down and keep them quite simple. So, so feasibility, it doesn't guarantee feasibility, but risk and connection, that you can identify places with really important connection in that situation.
Prue,
yes, yep.
Please take a pause here. Some really interesting conversation happening in the chat room. So I start with a very interesting comment, and that's beautiful because we have international practitioners here, and Tendekai raises this question. There are situations that if you reduce the speed of traffic, you increase the risk of security of people attacking the car in some really unsafe environment. And just so we have an interaction between safety and security. So what are your thoughts on those kind of situations and, the interaction between safety and security?
I have to say, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, just to give you a second to think there, Prue, I have not had to encounter this kind of thinking in any of the decision making associated with road transport. So it's kind of, you're thinking of some societal issues that are causing some challenges there, but it's really interesting to think about. I think it's going to be one where we're going to open it up to the group for thoughts. Because I don't think anybody on this panel is going to have experience in that.
I did have one thing though. Oh yeah. Can I just throw something out there? Because I was noticing we were on a very busy road the other day, and we had signalized crossings and raised crossings. Very rarely did we have, in a busy kind of pedestrianised area, very rarely did we actually have to stop at the raised crossings. We could reduce our speeds. The signalized crossings required, vehicles were stopped. But the raised crossings, you know, in some situations, it means if you can see far enough ahead, you can lower your vehicle speeds without stopping. And I don't know how that would affect risk, but I imagine it would not be so bad.
So what you're saying that the free flow effect of raised crossing can be actually good for security as well.
Considered, I have no experience in this area as well, but
yeah, and also lighting or other sort of amenities during the night. So another sort of area of interest here is that sort of liability. So we talked about duty of care, and we need to take action. Sometimes people like to stand behind that sort of stone wall that no, I don't want to do anything. What are your thoughts about encouraging practitioners to take risk, but in a good way to sort of do something for pedestrians? What are your thoughts, experience on that?
Was that to me?
Yes, and also after that we can go to the panel as well. So maybe I open for a panel.
Yeah, let's go open to the panel because I was.
Sorry, I was reading a question about roundabout design interaction with. So I missed that.
I got a bit distracted by the chat as well.
Cool. So the question is, we have several practitioners sitting in our sort of different departments, and they're more scared of doing something and be legally liable for doing something rather than sitting and not doing anything, because if they do that, they're safe. Nobody asked them, why didn't you do anything?
It seems to be an issue in our industry that we feel like if we touch it, we have to make it perfect, and we're much more comfortable not touching it than coming up with a solution that might, potentially not be perfect or fail or cause people to get unhappy and things. So I think as an industry, we need to get better at trialing things. Potentially saying that's not perfect, that's not great, we're going to redesign it. We've got options, I know in Queensland now and in New Zealand, they've got options for trialing quicker, lighter, cheaper systems. So you can even use temporary raised safety platforms and things like that. So yeah, I'd agree that we need to be looking at doing something, and I think we've got enough guidance. I think it's a really good time in Australia to do that because we have enough guidance with the safe system principles adopted in our road design guidance to trial innovative approaches.
So a few observations from the chat, people agree, and this is like quite obviously global, like happening in Colombia as well. And people mention a number of examples, the system that Brian mentioned in Queensland not helping. Also, I wanted to mention an experience we had in Victoria for the Safe System Road Infrastructure Program. What we did, we brought a senior lawyer in the department to talk to all our practitioners, to talk about their liability and how they would be liable if things happen that they could do something else for duty of care. So I encourage people to bring those kind of lawyers in their organization to talk to their people, give them assurance that if you do something, you're safe. If you don't do something, you're not safe. A very specific question, Prue, before going back to your beautiful community-led planning. The question here is, let me bring it up. Is a raised crossing compatible with formal school crossing?
With a formal school crossing, yes, we have guidance around that in Queensland too, where there's all day or demand at other times. Ken, that will be something section, but yes, we can in terms of where, yes, we can definitely do that. And I'd encourage it. It's normally if there's demand there outside school hours as well. Anyway, so I'd encourage it.
Cool. Sorry for interrupting the flow, Ken. We go back to you after the pause. Prue, floor is yours.
Okay, right. Remember where I am. Okay, so now we are going into community-led planning. So community-led planning, what's good about this? It's really about engaging with the community to identify where they need crossings and asking them really explicit questions, really very specific about their neighbourhood. We're not asking them how to solve the world's road design problems and all kind of general stuff. We're asking them very specific stuff because they're the experts of their neighbourhoods and where they need to go and where they're living and what their lives look like and what we need to do to connect these networks up. So I really like this process as a place to not just identify where there's risk and where there's connection, but looking at places where the two come together. So they know they want to use it and they know that there's risk because it doesn't feel safe. So where the community-led plan is really tapping into this community knowledge, and what we want to do is we want to find out where are the severance points in the community, where does it feel unsafe, where is there latent demands, what are the priorities, and we're also tapping into existing communication channels. So rather than trying to create our own communication channels around our, road organisations, we're actually trying to take this kind of approach or even have it led by the communities. So where I've applied it is around schools, which is fantastic because schools have really good communication channels, like, with one or two a few emails, you can tap into the P&C network and they're spreading it out. And people that I've engaged with have been really engaged on this issue and committed, because children are highly mobile in our communities. They need to get to school each day. They also need to get to an enormous amount of after-school activities. They're possibly more mobile than many adults. So in terms of feasibility, it doesn't, necessarily draw out places that are feasible, but that's something you can do as practitioners, but it's really good at identifying places where there's risk and connection and finding that overlap. So I'm going to talk through, and this is one of the methodologies that I've been using that works well, but I'm just going to talk through this process as one way to do it. So this is kind of like a 4-step process where the first stage of the process is heavily engaging with the community to find the barriers in the network. And that's usually done through an electronic survey. For some communities, this works really well because they can't physically get to a place to fill out the surveys. When we've had electronic surveys as well, I've sometimes taken them along to my local residents group that has lots of elderly people who aren't so familiar with using, doing electronic surveys. But in those groups, there's often people willing to help other people do it, or I've done it for other people in my community. So the first step is to find it, usually with that electronic survey, but with some other techniques as well. The next step is to define and prioritise the problems. So we don't just know there was a problem. That's where we kind of draw back to those safe system principles, because we need to understand what's going wrong there. Then we look at scoping or planning a treatment that could solve that or resolve that. Some of them aren't resolvable and they need to be put for longer term planning, but we're trying to find the ones that we can, and then designing and building. So if you look down the bottom, it goes from kind of the parent care community input at the start of the process and then to the engineering input in the second half. So I've got some results from some plans just so you can see what it looks like in practice. So this was a study that was done at a school, and this school, we got about 80 responses. So, and each person was allowed to identify up to 10 spots on the map where safer crossings were needed. So the question was more specific about where are safer crossings needed so your children could walk or cycle to school. So with 80 responses and each person able to put 10 spots on the map, if they didn't know what they were talking about, we'd probably just have a snow screen kind of here. But we've got really clear trends in terms of these are the kind of 10 spots that we need fixed to connect up our walking and riding networks. So just some of the sites that they identified. So this site here there's a side road crossing. There's also this zebra crossing. So the comments about the zebra crossing was that they'd like to see it raised, or they'd like some speed humps or speed cushions or something before it. So really good alignment between what they're picking up and safe system principles. The existing refuge popped up as a hotspot. So this meets our engineering standards. We don't have any problems with that in terms of existing compliance, but again and again, I've found that refuges are treatments that people aren't happy with. And if you look at them through those safe system principles, I wouldn't be happy with them from a risk perception either. There's a number of those principles they fail on. So these are some of the other sites that the parents came up with. So again, this is a median treatment or a refuge crossing. This is a 60-kilometre-an-hour road. The busier the roads, the harder it is to cross. This roundabout is really a confluence of all different school routes, and that one popped up as well. If it was close to the school, it probably would have been higher. So just as an example of another site, like this is a 2-lane roundabout. You know, with the budgets we have for this project, we can't do anything about that at this point in time. So we're looking at the more minor ones, but it's certainly a major barrier in the system, and people are just actually going all the way down here to cross at these lights. So you find out really specific information from these surveys. That's also that really repeatable story. So when we give this back to the school principal, he's like, great, you know, the next time the councillor asks us if there's anything we need, we're just going to pull out our plan and say, well, we need this and this and this. So what else do we discover from the community led planning? So we want to know what works well and what doesn't work well. So we've got our maps, and that tells us a little bit about what's not working, but we ask really specific questions about how concerned are you when your child using this type of crossing, and we give them pictures of it. And the results have been really interesting. So what have I got here? I'll just put that up. So if we just start at the top here, in terms of a raised zebra crossing or a raised pedestrian crossing, we've got about 80% of parents not concerned when their children use those crossing facilities. So if we want to create safe routes to school, most of the people caring for children are fairly comfortable with this kind of device. So that's great place to start. And we've got about 20% of people somewhat concerned. This is being repeated, you know, it's between 80 and 90% of parents are either, somewhat concerned or very concerned about, hang on, I've just lost my train of thought, but 80 or 90% of parents are not concerned when people are using raised crossings. They just perform better than everything else. This survey didn't have traffic signals on it because there weren't many locations, but they perform in a similar way in terms of people being somewhat not concerned. Lost my train there. But refuge crossings, if we go down to that, we've suddenly got less than 10% of parents being not concerned. So if we look back at the problem of why aren't, you know, kids walking or cycling to school, we used to have 80% of kids walking to school, now we've got 20%. We need to have a look at this. Well, are the majority of people comfortable with the treatments we're providing? Whenever it comes to a busy road, this is what I'm seeing out there on the network, and they're not comfortable with that. Refuges at roundabouts, we've got less than 5% of people not concerned about that, and the rest somewhat are very concerned. Before we did these surveys, it was really hard for me to flag side road crossings as an issue to be addressed in my studies. And then every single study again has come up with people being very concerned or somewhat concerned about untreated side roads as well. So that's where, you know, we went through a bit of detail and watched Wally crossing the road and how he made a mistake and things, and that predictability criteria really comes into that. I'm just having a look at, and this is my assessment of the alignment of these treatments, and I think the parents are doing pretty well in terms of their knowledge of safe system principles. And I take it back to, you know, our vision in road safety is that no one is killed or seriously injured on the road network, and that's my vision for my children getting to school as well, that none of us killed or seriously injured. So I can see why, you know, they're doing a pretty good job in terms of this. So the treatments that the parents are looking at are actually aligning really well with safe system principles. So from our perspective, it's helping to do our work. You know, they're identifying the places where there's risk, where there's need, and then we can go in and do our investigations and find out what we can do there. So a summary of brownfield sites. So we went through 3 different methodologies. It's a bit like the principles and things. It's about finding a methodology that works, that's simple, that's going to work for the organisation and the resources that you've got in your organisation. But these are 3 that I've chosen because they're things that work well and provide that kind of simple methodology. And I want to see a lot of focus going on what's actually happening, you know, on the ground and getting these things out there. Oh, we've got an action time again now. So this is going to be a multiple choice. It's just going in the chat. There's no polls in this. So we use the multiple choice. The spots on this map show A, an unusually precise storm forecast. B, future planning for electric helicopter air taxi landing pads. Or C, places where safe system principles, parental concerns, children's and vehicles most likely collide.
Yes, somebody say B.
B. Apparently, we do have the helicopter people in Caloundra, and there's some weird stuff about helicopters.
Lachlan needs another prize for a really good job.
When I was talking to a helicopter specialist colleague, he's actually very pro active transport, because from what he was saying, we are going to have helicopter taxis available at the edge of Caloundra before we actually have a safe crossing so he can ride his bike to the airport. We're going to, if that makes sense. I didn't describe it particularly well, but I just thought that was a little bit sad for our industry, that we were going to have these electric one-person helicopters that could get you, 400 kilometers in a couple of hours before we can get a safe crossing over one of our roundabouts. So
Crazy.
anyway. Okay, moving on. Have we got any questions about that?
We've got
section?
a series of questions, but I wait for action time to go over.
Okay.
And then we ask that. Yeah.
Okay, so the next one is, yep. So Wombat is obviously C. True or false? 8 out of 10 parents said they were not concerned when their kids use this type of crossing. It's pretty simple action time. We're getting tired.
True.
Yeah.
True. Yes. True. We've got consensus.
Consensus. Yep. Okay, so another one is likelihood and consequences of crashes at this intersection are higher because A, vehicle speeds greater than 50 kilometers an hour. B, the crossing is frequently used by children. C, the crossing is frequently used by elderly people. D, there are no other crossings within 1 kilometer in each direction. Or E, all of the above.
Yes, I think that the training is working.
It's kind of like one of those government kind of questions where it's incredibly obvious. But anyway, we're in the second half. Ken, you're looking confused. You've got that look that I said, if you don't know what I'm talking about, do that look.
Oh, that's just my resting face. No. I was looking at the site and wondering exactly where it's just on near a roundabout, is it?
Oh, there's roundabouts either side. Hang on, I didn't even play the video. Have a look at this. There's
That's
roundabouts.
Yep.
It's a 2-lane roundabouts at either end of kind of an 800-meter stretch or something. And this road has kind of got to the point that even with a crossing, it is frightening, and even without children, it is frightening to cross. So it's one of those roads that, it just, I think of it like a shooting range really in the middle of the town. And the comments, it's interesting when you do these community surveys, because we have the heat maps and that's good, but I always give people an opportunity to write comments, and some of them are really powerful. There was a comment in this one about we need to lower the speeds on the road and get some of those raised crossings in to connect the two sides of our community back together, because this road runs right through the town. There's only one signalised crossing in a 5K stretch for people on the two sides of that community to connect. So interesting. So that's that one. Yep. Okay. I just put a little bit of a stretch because I felt like we'd be going fairly hard there. But if we've got any questions, otherwise we'll keep going on to
one observation and maybe a question to the whole panel. But I start with yourself, Prue. So people say, hey, look, putting race crossing might have some consequences. It might have security issues. It might have congestion. It might have environmental pollution. And my answer in the chat room was, is there any evidence? Because there are quite a few myths going on, as like Tendekai has mentioned here, some of there are myths going on. What are your thoughts? And then I open to the panel to answer that as well.
I wrote an article a while ago about we're trying to create a system. We need to understand what risks we can tolerate, and the SAFE system is really good at defining what we can tolerate and what we can't. We can't tolerate deaths and serious injuries on our traffic system. We might have to tolerate some lower speeds. We might have to tolerate some noise. I don't think noise is a big issue with race crossings because lower speeds facilitate less noise, but there are things we have to tolerate as part of this, and I think that we can and we need to be kind of reframing it in terms of this is what we can't tolerate and this is what we might have to tolerate. We might have to tolerate having to walk a bit further to our vehicles, and there's all sorts of things that we need to be looking at tolerating. Other people?
Yeah, Bridget, Ken, what do you reckon?
I said in the chat that I didn't say this, but I get quite grumpy when we talk about raised crossings raising emissions, because I think you can model anything to show any answer you want. And if you times a tiny emission by 1,000 vehicles or 10,000 vehicles, you'll get a number. But that doesn't account for the number of people who have stopped driving because it's easy to walk now. And if we're going to win this challenge of making the planet habitable, then we need to have much less driving. So the fact that it discourages driving through congestion or any other method is a plus for me, because we need environments that are walkable and cyclable and accessible locally to everyone. So I don't buy the argument that we shouldn't put in a raised crossing or even count it as a cost, raised emissions.
Great point. Great point. Ken, man.
Yeah, I think it's been summed up well by Bridget and Prue there and yourself, Faiz, with, you know, providing ourselves with some evidence, and then you can fabricate a study to show anything you want. You kind of know what good practice is and what we're trying to achieve. So we sort of move down that path.
Oh, I totally agree, and I think the panel is quite unanimous on this. So Prue, the floor is yours.
Okay, so we're going to go into our Swan Hill case study now, though, but just before we do, I just want to show that I have put some of these, the results. These are some of the places that people identified in their walks, in terms of the walk survey results, just to see, so you can get an idea of what other practitioners are thinking about. I find it really helps with my, you know, I'm kind of like calibrating my judgment against other people. What are other people thinking about where we should put raised crossings and things? So there's a couple of examples there where people have identified them. There's also this lovely question here where we asked about, think about places where raised crossings should be considered. What are the top 3 reasons or blockers that might stop you installing raised crossings? So that table's really interesting. I started trying to color code it, but given I just got the results yesterday, that didn't go that well. And anyway, you guys can finish it off for me. That would be great. But you know, this is really interesting information. We're creating our own data set with this stuff as well, because we really are experts in terms of what are the barriers to getting them in. That's what we do. So I just thought before we go through the Swan Hill results, you can have a look for a little bit more detail there if you're interested. Now, let me just remember how to get back. Okay, so we're going through our Swan Hill case study. Where did we decide crossings are needed in Swan Hill? Just some background, I grew up in Swan Hill, so it was a town I knew, and I was like, oh, that's a nice kind of neat sized town that people could possibly get their heads around in not too long. I didn't notice that anyone was trying to provide crossing connections to the giant Murray Cod. Obviously, they've underestimated the significance of it, not being locals. No, I think locals would agree with you there. So where might we need raised crossing? So what we were doing, we were kind of pretending like you were a community who lived here and knew this area, but obviously we aren't. We're bringing our practitioner experience to this. I think if we ask the people in Swan Hill where they needed crossings, I think they'd actually do a slightly better job, probably a much better job of identifying where they're most needed. What do you think? People agreeing? We're going to trust ourselves or trust the Swan Hill people? I actually did get some of my nieces to do that. I need to come back and compare this result. So yeah, so you know, we have to understanding we don't have the lived experience here. We're just bringing our practitioner experience to this, and we haven't identified a trend with the first community that hasn't, but that's understandable. So we'll have a look at some of these facts. Oh, here, I've got a video. So just want to give you an example of, you know, how useful this can be when you are the practitioner who's getting the results, and you zoom in and you have a look and you go, what's going on there? This is great. This is the roundabout in between the commercial areas of town. We've got some people thinking, okay, we're going to change that signalised intersection to raised crossings because it's a really important part in the main street. There's an existing crossing up here. So we just get an idea of, you know, we can zoom in, look what's going on. We don't have a trend because we're not locals in this situation. This is a really important desire line. Sorry, it's really hard to talk to this stuff, but some of the things I really liked is that we didn't just pick up on the town centre. We picked up on schools, we picked up on kindergartens, we picked up on you know, a variety of different areas. So it's good to see that we're thinking about neighborhoods as well as about kind of CBDs and town centre areas and things. So this is a school. We had a few comments about people saying, I don't know where the school accesses are, so I don't know where to provide them. That's good to see as well. So this is some more crossings around a school. Yep, we've got another school over there. I didn't even know that school was there these days. We also had someone focus in on a kindergarten and a childcare centre. So, you know, these are some of our most vulnerable users. So that's really important. Someone, obviously not a local to the area because we actually had, I think we're coming up to it now, but someone identified an irrigation channel to put a crossing on. They can look a little bit like a road from a distance as well. So, and between some of the sports facilities and the schools. So I liked seeing that come up in our in what we were looking at. So this is the school up to the north here. And then there's sports facilities, and we're looking at having some connection across this road as well. That's probably enough. I just have it. Oh, this is the irrigation channel. And I thought back to it, and I thought back of, oh, they used to put power poles across the irrigation channel. And I remember balancing my bike across one. And I think, yeah, my mum would probably support, you know, having a better crossing than just a fallen over power pole across an irrigation channel. So this is the kindergarten that someone's picked up on as well. So we're thinking about the whole community, really. So I loved this question. So I tried to use a similar principle that we do with communities in terms of asking practitioners really specific questions in terms of what did you think about when you're putting the crossings in? And I think this is a really good way of us looking at what our own biases are in terms of who we consider first and what everyone considers and what we don't consider. But I guess the caveat to this is that I came up with this list. So already we've removed things, you know, I haven't put in, let me see. I don't even think I put a pub in there. So, you know, we should have. That's how boring my life is. Yeah. So, you know, the caveat to this list is we've missed things. I've missed things. But it's a good way, I think, developing this list. And if we look at what else we should be thinking about on the list, I think I might have had an option for that. It'd be a great way of, you know, having that bit of a checklist. Have I thought about all these different places, or I am going into my own lived experiences here? So I found that interesting. I put that on there as well. Oh, that's it. That's a summary. There was one other comment there. So as well as that, I did ask, let me see. I don't have that there. Okay. Any questions about that? Otherwise, I'm just going to go into our summary.
Please go. And after that, we're going to have a number of quick exercises before we finish. Thank you, Prati.
Oh, yes, I forgot about the exercise. Sorry about that. Okay, so just to summarize. No, I'm getting, yes, this is, sorry, I apologize, I've lost my spot. Okay, so we're going to summarize with our exercises, and then I've got a summary slide as well. Okay, which of the sustainable safety principles in this is this facility struggling with? So just use the chat here. So we've got functionality, predictability, homogeneity, state of awareness, and forgivingness. Yeah, I think I do need to go to the pub more. It shows how boring my life is.
So we have all the above is one. B, predictability.
B, yeah. So it's kind of one of the reasons I really like these principles. Often we have a lot of the other ones covered quite well, but it's this predictability where we fail. So it's a good one for kind of picking up on what all the issues are. All except perhaps E. Yeah, it could be some of the other ones as well. It's not working that well in terms of the vehicle speeds are certainly low, but they're not low enough for a shared space. Dewport Street, yep, that's the one. Yep. Okay. Can raised crossings be installed on bus routes? It's a good.
The answer is resounding yes.
Yes, yeah. This is a crossing that has been there well over a decade. It's been there a really long time. It's quite a high volume road because it's, you know, a kind of a snazzy suburb next to the beach. It's, you know, it's quite a prestigious kind of little community kind of hub. But this crossing is doing a fantastic job of providing access to that beautiful little shopping centre at the beach and park and open space area. So I would say this is a much loved crossing that does a really good job of managing complex movements, you know, in a busy little hub, and it's stood the test of time. So that's why I wanted to put that one in there. Okay, action time. So this crossing is on a 60-kilometre road. It connects to schools, bus stops and residents to the town centre. It's the one we saw before with the video. Complaints have been received about this crossing and others along the street. Use the poll to describe how you feel about the following treatments to treat this problem. So we're going to put this the poll up now. So what you're going to say is basically a signalised pedestrian crossing, preferred, maybe, or if I have to, and give an answer to that. So we'll just wait for a couple of minutes, let you do that.
Prue, is it possible for you to play the video again?
Yeah, yes, it is. Yep.
Just ensuring that, people see that.
I think I've worked out the closer you stand to the cars, the faster they seem, I think. The further back, it doesn't seem as fast. What do you think? Like this feels very fast on site.
Yeah, it's true. I've been using some of those radar apps, like they're apps that are trying to replicate a radar gun.
Yeah.
You if you stand too close to the road, as you move your phone, it just loses its mind. Anyway.
Right.
So Clint is saying, are we choosing just one answer in the poll?
No, we're going to go through all of them. So for each one, for a signalised crossing, you say preferred, maybe, or if I have to. So in terms of that kind of crossing, for a signalised intersection with crossings, yeah, you preferred, that'd be great. Maybe, or if I have to. Raised signalised intersection with crossings, preferred. Reduce posted speed, install raised crossings, roundabout with raised crossings. So probably there'll be one preferred, and the others will be maybe, and some will be if I have to.
Yep.
It's not next to a roundabout. No, it's about probably half a kilometre from a roundabout. Actually, there's two, half a kilometre from two roundabouts, probably mid-block between them.
Ken, how are we going with the answers?
Sorry, I was reading the chat, which is just fascinating. I'm loving the interaction. Okay, let's stop that in 3, 2, 1.
Woohoo.
And we'll share the results. You've got a bit of a mix there.
Okay. Oh, so what I should do this. Can everyone see the results?
Everybody can.
Yeah. Oh, this is good. This wasn't an obvious one. We definitely have a bit of a mixed here. So signalised pedestrian crossing, so preferred, we've got about a third of people saying that's preferred. We've got about half saying maybe, and just a few people saying if I have to. So signalised intersection, signalised pedestrian crossing, it will really improve the predictability, provided people wait and it doesn't have too long a wait time. It won't necessarily do that forgivingness. So, it's definitely an option, could be the preferred option. Maybe is a good option as well there. Signalised intersection with crossings. So yeah, we've got a bit of a mix about, a third preferred, maybe if I have to. So all these options, I put them down because I think they're all on the list in this situation. Every one of them is going to improve it. So, it's there's probably some preferences there, but all of them are worth thinking about. Raised signalised intersection with crossings. So we've got kind of almost an even mix there as well. Reduce the speed limit, install raised crossings along the corridor. So that's looking at places along the corridor. Preferred, yeah, that's good. There's actually, this corridor does have that access function and through function. So it's not like we can just fix this one place. We've actually got a whole lot of places that we need to get connectivity. So that is an option. We could also make it safer for people moving in and out of the surrounding street networks as well. Roundabout with raised crossings, that's also a good option that will help reduce the vehicle speeds along that corridor as well, but it probably doesn't, you know, address the sediments along the corridor as well. So I think that's a pretty good set of answers. I think they're all possibilities that are on the table, and I think we've kind of, the one that's probably winning is reduce to the posted speed limit and install raised crossings along the corridor, acknowledging that people don't want to walk a long way out that way. So that was good. I wanted to put everybody on the line in terms of, you know, how do these rate according to other treatments, and I think we did well there. So now I'm going through the summary slide. So I just want to try and bring it all together. I know we've gone through a lot today, but that's why we've kind of got that summary sheet too, so you can go into the resources and download that. There's also links to those studies I referenced. But basically at the start, we were talking about what are these 3 criteria that makes a raised crossing a raised crossing. Where are we now? So we did our walks to have a look at, you know, how we observe the environment, what we're thinking about. And we've got some of that stuff in the Miro board about, you know, this is the things we're thinking about and the things that other people are thinking about. We looked at greenfield sites, and we looked at connection and where connections needed, in terms of we actually need connection in most places where we've got people wanting to get across roads or across intersections. And then we went through our sustainable safety criteria to identify risk and had that methodology of breaking down how specific sites are working. We had these 3 methodologies that can be, you know, from anywhere from ad hoc to really systematic, and we talked about those. The community-led planning, it might seem a bit complicated, but actually it's really quite simple to deliver as well with the tools we have nowadays. We went through those rules, but we also went through, you know, how we need to change our environments to work with the rules that we've got at this present time. And so I need to understand what the rules are so that we can create the environments we need to provide these facilities. And then we went through our Swan Hill case study, and we didn't come up with a, you know, a beautiful simplified map of, you know, the 10 or 15 or 20 sites that we need in Swan Hill. We actually came up with lots of different sites because we are not the experts of this neighbourhood, but at least hopefully you'll get a chance to see that it is an effective way of kind of drilling into and getting that useful data set. So questions?
Questions. So Prue, we've got the last question for you from Naomi here.
Okay.
So in the chat room, like, where do you put crossing legs?
Both in same plane as you enter the Wombat. In the photos, one was more and one was oh, the crossing legs. Right. That'll be Ken. So the crossing legs sign, is that what we're talking about?
Yep.
Yep. So you put them on both sides of the poles, either side of the crossing. Is that right, Ken?
Yeah, I'm just going
Right.
to, I can bring up a slide out of 1742 if we want.
Yeah.
I mean, I will cover it in the
yes,
in the content, but happy.
Beautiful. So Naomi, if you you know, bear with us, like next week we're going to be talking about that. Just considering the time, I want to take these 2 minutes to first big thank you to Prue. Prue, you covered a lot of areas, from both principles to practice to practicality, lots of great advice. And we're really thankful to you, and beautiful delivery as well. And you created lots of interaction and humor in the chat room. So we're very thankful to you. So Bridget, I want to bring you in for a minute to give us a teaser of the next module before we finish. So thank you, Prue. Over to you, Bridget.
Great, thanks Prue and Hafiz. So I've just got a couple of little things to tell you about that we're going to be talking through on Wednesday. We're going to be talking about the who of raised crossings. So that's thinking about humans and all of their varieties and states. And my aim with this session is to have us thinking about all of us as humans and people, rather than users who we might put in boxes, and think about how do we cater for all people, not different boxes of people. So in preparation for that, I'm going to get you to do 2 things over the next few days. One of them is to, which might seem a bit left field, but I want you to do some thought sampling. Thought sampling is when you find out what somebody is thinking about at a moment in time. And I'm going to use that to talk about what awareness means for pedestrians and for drivers. So sometime over the next few days, if you live with somebody else, or you can get them to ask you, just say to yourself or them, what are you thinking about now? And it will be helpful if you can do that while you're out walking somewhere or when you're driving with someone else. So ideally, you're asking this question of someone who's driving a car or someone who's walking or riding a bike. What are you thinking about now? Just when there's a lull in the conversation, or if you're just to have an insight into whether or not they're thinking about the task they're doing or some other random thing. And we'll talk more about that. So thought sampling, what are you thinking now? Ask some questions. And the other one is to think about human characteristics and states. Think about yourself as a human pedestrian and the things that might affect your mobility personally. So not other people or other users, but yourself. What might happen to you in the course of your life that means you are less mobile, less strong, less alert. You might think about times when you feel sick or when you're injured or when you're cumbersome carrying luggage. Think about some of the situations you can imagine where you personally have a different mobility day to day than your optimum self. So that's just those two things. Thought sampling, what are you thinking about now? And who am I as a human and how does that affect my mobility?
Beautiful. Cool. Thank you, Bridget. Thank you, the panel. Thank you, Kathy, in the background. And again, thank you very much, Prue, for a fantastic session. Thank you, our participants. I wish you a wonderful day. Enjoy your lunch or dinner or wherever you are. Please come back. It was great having this session with you. Thank you.